Hello and welcome to the Enterprise Performance Management Leadership Forum. Thank you for joining us. We heard from a number of people that wanted to attend today's forum that weren't able to join us today. So we are recording today's webinar and we'll post it to our website soon after the event. Please be sure to share it with others that you feel might benefit from what you learned today. We are very fortunate today to have two very experienced government leaders with us. Let me introduce them to you. First, let me introduce Kathleen Webb. Kathleen is the Chief Operating Officer of the California State Controller's Office. She started her career after a career at State Farm Insurance as the insurance advisor to Governor Schwarzenegger. Then she went on to have leadership roles with the Department of General Services, Prison Healthcare Services, CalPERS, California Government Operations Agency, and most recently with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Go ahead and wave, Kathleen, let everybody know. There you are. And also with us today is Chris Kautz. She is the Deputy Director of the Oregon Health Authority. Chris started her career at the Oregon Budget and Management Division and then went on to play leadership roles at the Oregon Department of Consumer and Business Services and the Oregon Department of Corrections, and then had the role of Deputy Director at Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Administrative Services, the Department of Revenue, and then her current role at Oregon Health Authority. Welcome, panel. It's very good to have you with us.
Glad to be with you here.
Thank you. Kathleen, I'm going to start with you. I'd like to start with, how do you define this subject that we're talking about today, enterprise performance management, and where are you on your personal journey with enterprise performance management?
Well, that's a loaded question, Scott, because I think one of the things I've learned is when we talk about enterprise performance management, it can be as small or as big as it needs to be. You kind of have to meet people where they're at and departments where they're at. For me, when I was with the GovOps agency and I was really kind of exploring how do we optimize performance in the state of California, it really came down to understanding how departments were currently measuring their performance. And I think I stumbled upon this kind of very easy performance measurement chain, and I realized most departments didn't even have this in place. And that's, understanding your inputs. So what resources are you being given? Your staffing resources, other operational resources. What are your processes? Which is where lean becomes really an important component of it, because it helps you really start to measure your processes, understanding cycle time, error rates, and everything like that. And then what are your outputs? I think most state departments were reasonably good at outputs, but even then not truly capturing it in a measurement way that one would think. But more importantly, how are your outputs driving your outcomes? And so when I think about enterprise performance management, it's such a lovely framework to really bring that together and create what I call not only a toolkit, but a playbook for departments to really think about how they're performing and really start moving to becoming more results oriented. And I think the other big piece for me is being able to tell our stakeholders, whether it's the legislature, it's the Department of Finance, is be able to have a method that is explainable, defendable, and executable. And I think that's what a good enterprise performance management framework does for you.
Excellent. And Chris, you've implemented enterprise performance management at a couple agencies. Can you share with us some of the challenges that you're facing, particularly at your current agency, Oregon Health Authority, and how you feel that enterprise performance management has helped you address those challenges?
Thanks, Scott. Pleasure to do that. So at Oregon Health Authority, when there was a leadership turnover, and not just at the top, but a number of positions turned over in the fall of 2017. And so when we came on board, it was clear that it was an agency in crisis. And so we took the opportunity in 2018 to use Mass Ingenuity's fundamentals map as a way to see what everybody was doing and to talk about how we were going to try to move towards streamlining the processes we had in place, documenting them, and then ultimately, as Kathleen has already said, not only seeing what the processes are doing, but what are the outcomes we're achieving. At Oregon Health Authority, we've used the outcomes we're one of the agencies that makes Mass Ingenuity sometimes pull their hair, because we have like 170 plus outcome measures. Most of we don't have literally 100 of that, but we have a number of them that we use disparity information to look further down inside. And since our 10-year strategic goal is to eliminate health inequities, that ability to see the data at the level of race, ethnicity, disability, language, whatever it may be, has been instrumental in us seeing where there are huge gaps. While it may look across our organization that Oregonians are achieving good health, when you look underneath the numbers and you look at race and ethnicity, we see a lot of health inequities out there in relationship to that. And this system was really the thing that allowed everybody in a room, everybody across the organization to see that and recognize that while they're doing good work, we had to dig in more and really get at some of that work. So that's how we've used it to really kind of change our trajectory and focus of our work, to recognize that you have to look underneath some of this in order to actually start changing what is necessary for all. So when you know, and data is tricky, right? You can use it at a high level and you can get all sorts of good information, but it's the digging down that the system really allows us to do that brings forward work that still needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Kathleen, similar question to you, especially in your most recent work at DMV. Same question. What were the challenges, and how has the work that you've done so far helped you address those? And I understand you're in a new position now, but nonetheless, you really spearheaded that work.
Yeah, and similar to Chris, you know, when I came into the DMV, there had been an exodus of the leadership team there. We had formed under the GovOps agency the DMV strike team, so I was initially part of that effort. And then with the exodus, the governor asked me to come in and serve as the acting director of DMV. And I think one of the things I had to really dive in and understand, much like Chris was talking about, is helping folks not be so tactically focused on what we were doing. But it was also about being better risk managers. I mean, I think at the end of the day, if you have the right information, you have the data, you're better positioned to project and forecast. And you shouldn't be in a crisis situation, because you should have seen it coming and then be able to mitigate and plan for it. And so I think in totality, I saw an organization that was operating very tactically. It may have had a strategic plan, but there seemed to be a real disconnect between the strategic plan and what was happening at the operational day-to-day level. And I think that's true. Probably, Chris, you've seen it as well, but it really creates a problem, because at the end of the day, you know, when I introduced the word key performance indicators, so KPIs, that was actually literally a foreign term. I had people look like their eyes were glazed over. What is that? What are you asking me to do? And that was with a lot of departments, not just at the Department of Motor Vehicles, but it was really kind of thinking about what is our mission, what are we trying to accomplish within that mission to better serve our customers, and then what are those performance measures that tell that story of how we're doing it. So I would say we had too few performance measures to really talk about what we were doing and how we were doing it, to then make informed decisions. We didn't see data as an asset. I think Chris kind of alluded to that, but data is an incredible asset to help you make better decisions. But we again, we're not paying attention to, I think, the right data points, creating those data points and understanding what data was going to tell us. Change management. I will tell you, I think most departments completely underestimate the magnitude of change management that you have to engage with to advance anything you're doing. But part of it is you got to meet people where they're at. You know, what is the culture? What do they know how to do? Celebrate, you know, what they're good at. I always like that term, appreciative inquiry. Celebrate what people are doing well, but then help them see how they can do it even better with some of the tools that you're bringing in to help them. And then I think, you know, at the end of the day, transformation. I mean, you have to be thinking about your workforce. You have to think about your processes, and you have to think about technology. And probably like a lot of other departments out there, you know, DMV was laden with legacy systems. You know, we were running out of people that even know how to work with assembler code and COBOL code, So part of it was also recognizing that we have to actually move to more modern technology systems, more cloud-based solutions, and really helping our folks, go through that process. One of my shockers, Chris, and it probably is no different than some of your experiences, is when I was roaming some of the work areas for DMV, is still seeing people work on green screens. I mean, that's how old our computers were and how limited they were in being able to perform the things that people just expected us to do in 2020. But we just didn't have the tools to be able to perform at that level. So there's a number of things I would say, but I would tell you one of the things that I think we were able to do very well is leverage a crisis. And COVID is a crisis, but we were able to leverage it and accelerate a lot of what we needed to do because we had to. And I really appreciate our staff stepping up in that moment of crisis and taking the journey with us, because we had to figure out how to serve our customers in new and different ways. They weren't coming into the field offices. We had to figure out how to better serve them in our call center environment on the website. So, nothing like leveraging a crisis to really kind of accelerate where you need to go, right?
Exactly. And Chris, Kathleen mentioned one of what I feel is keys to success in this work, that's change management. But can you touch on some of the other elements that you have found are keys to implementing enterprise performance management, and what are some of those challenges that are related to that?
Thanks, Scott. Sure. We knew because both our director had done performance system management at his previous organization. I had done it with Scott at a previous organization. We served that together. We knew that it takes resources to actually keep it alive and support it in a way so that leadership can have the conversation about, here's what we need to do, but you need someone who understands the system and can work with all the different programs, divisions, sections, however you've got them laid out in your organization, and can bring that collective knowledge together. We needed a data person, a person who was just going to bring all the information together. Initially we did it on Excel spreadsheets. We did end up purchasing Mass Ingenuity's result system. So now it's all in one spot. People can see it. It comes out the same way every time, right? And there's something to be said for consistency. And we also hired a change management person to really help us think about how we go about our work, what is our work driving towards, and what do we need to do in communication with our employees, with other managers, to ensure that we were keeping it out in front and talking about, to Kathleen's point, right? It isn't just about the data that it provides, but then how do you go in and change the processes behind it so that you start to actually move the needle, so to speak, right? You start to trend the way you want to trend with any of the targets, outcomes that you're looking for, right? But it's a commitment to those resources and keeping those online, and we have people full-time doing that. Maybe in a smaller agency you could get away with someone only doing that part-time or something like that, but it was a full-time resource commitment in our organization. The other thing I would say too is that it's a time commitment from leadership. It's a time commitment not only to develop the overall performance system, but to then keep it alive as it goes. And so while we did for a while during the pandemic, because we are the lead agency in Oregon in just dealing with all things pandemic, from mask requirements to vaccines to everything else, we did let go of some of our quarterly performance reviews, but we have picked those back up, and actually they have been a phenomenal way to re-engage the organization around the work. And now we're talking about, we're 3 years in and we're going to refresh our map, because as people have done the work over the last couple of years and, never let a good crisis go to waste, we see where we need to change some of what we thought was important 3 years ago. We need to redirect now and refresh and update our map so that we are even doing more to recognize where we want to go and where our gaps are. And so it's a challenge of time, it's a challenge of resources, and yet the richness of the conversation when you share the data and information is really what makes it all worth it in the end.
Kathleen, anything you wanted to add to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Chris shared. And I think one of the things that I was really excited in working with Scott, you and your team with DMV is, we were providing, I think, a method to engage our team, and to Chris's point, having those really important, rich conversations with our leadership. But I think most importantly, it was meeting them where they were at. It wasn't making them feel any less of themselves, but it was really trying to meet them where they're at. And how do we elevate ourselves as a team, as an organization, as individual leaders? And I think what I'm really looking forward, I'm sure my team can speak to it over at DMV, is really developing that maturity model to achieve that desired state. So it's really being clear about where we want to be, and then help everybody get there together as a team.
So one of the attendees is asking, wants to know, how do agency directors need to change how they operate and interact with staff in an enterprise performance management system? And I'll let either one of you start on that one.
So I'll talk a little bit about what we've done. So employee engagement is really important. One, to make sure that you're centered and heading directionally correct, but also it's a great way to have conversations with staff about what they're doing, and do they see themselves, so to speak, in the map, or maybe they don't, and those lead to some great conversations. We did some things, the map centers on your mission, vision, and values, which I think has been incredibly important for our organization. And we did town halls to go out and confirm those with all of the staff. So it was a great way to ground our performance system in who we are and what we're about, and then bring in those outcome measures and those processes that really reflect the work that we do and what we're trying to achieve. And so I would say, that is just one way that leadership put itself forward to go out and do that work. And now, right, it's Pat and I, the director of the organization, myself as deputy, who lead the quarterly performance reviews, because it reflects the ongoing leadership commitment and investment in time and effort going forward. And we actively participate in the questions, right? In questioning why is it like that in a constructive way, right? We have, like Kathleen said, always use the performance system as an opportunity about how can we do better, and not chastising those that may be, not performing as well, but really then having the opportunity to talk about what needs to change, what can we do to help going forward. And so it's that engagement that leadership really has to commit to and be present for, and has to hold the time on its calendar and invest the time, I think, in the long term, because then the organization recognizes the importance of it and gets excited about coming to share their story, what's happening, what needs to change, and how can we make that happen.
Kathleen, along those same lines, and Chris touched on having that safe environment to talk about what's not going well, but also celebrating, as you mentioned before, what is going well. Coming into an organization that might have a culture of fear rather than open sharing, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you and Steve faced in doing this work at DMV?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think amazingly, coming from the private sector into government, I was always kind of a little bit surprised about this aspect of fear with state employees, but it is the culture. But one of the things I would tell you is so important in kind of setting the tone is being very clear as a leader about your vision, but also really thinking about what are the values of your organization. And how do you shore up those values? I find sometimes when I come to departments, that really don't have a strong set of values and then don't have a method of recognizing those important values, is underground values start to emerge. And they're usually not the healthy values that are there for the organization. But leaders have to model the way. They have to demonstrate, what we value as an organization. And that oftentimes goes how we treat each other, right? I mean, that's that respect for each other and respect for our customers, and really being results oriented and customer service driven. So how do you celebrate those things? And I think one of the things I will tell you is, and it's hard because when something is going wrong, if you're the leader and you're an appointed leader, your neck is out there potentially. But I also realize that my success as a leader is very dependent on the success of those that are reporting to me. So how do I create an environment for them to be successful? And if they weren't successful, really diving into the root cause of why they weren't successful. And I think one of the beauties of the enterprise performance management is it does, readily allow you to dive into root cause. And root cause is usually not associated with a person. It's usually associated with you've got bad processes and you've plugged people into bad processes. And I would call an escalation process a process, so how are you escalating issues up the chain so that people know how to escalate it? And those processes probably need to be looked at as well so you understand how to do that. But it's really trying to get the folks to think about, this is not about individuals, this is about how we've structured our organization, how we move our work through the organization, how we make decisions, and really be focused objectively on how do we change that to get better outcomes. And that takes, I'll tell you what, sometimes it's hard when you feel like there's a lot of pressure on you coming from the governor's office about what the heck happened out there and what are you going to do differently. But I also know that you have to proactively and objectively come in and figure out how to solve the problem going forward and not just put a Band-Aid on it. Really address what is the problem, what contributed to the problem, and then go forward and realize part of the issue is people didn't know better, so they didn't have the tools, they didn't have the knowledge. That's why they made the decision they made or didn't react to something in the way that you would have hoped they would have reacted. So again, we are what we know and we are what we learned. And so how do you change that so people can perform at a higher level?
Well, Kathleen, I think this leads very nicely into the next question from one of the viewers is, can you explain the connection of lean to enterprise performance management? Is it the same? Is it different? And then how?
Chris, you want to go first and I'll follow?
I can certainly give it a whirl, and then Kathleen, you can take it from there. But so that's a great question. We have not deployed lean across our entire agency, but we do have one of the biggest components of our organization, which is the Oregon State Hospital, which is the state psychiatric hospital that has a whole quality department where they employ a number of lean leaders. And they do have, while we have an agency-wide enterprise performance system, the divisions inside of our organization have also chosen to create maps. And they actually were doing it before new leadership came on board. And they use the lean leaders in their place when especially they see that their measurements are below target about what needs to change in the processes in order to change where they're heading and what their outcomes are. And so they use them as a support system for the performance system overall, especially as Kathleen was talking in, when you get into root cause analysis and then you actually have to change a process, those lean leaders are ones that help the staff and the work teams work through that and document it in an ongoing way. And at the hospital, they use everything from lean and the whole A3s and all of that to rapid process improvement as a way to get at the things within their system that are showing up, red or in the yellow or trending the wrong way, and they need to reverse course. And so it's a positive component of their division-wide performance system overall.
Kathleen, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've become a big fan of business process improvement, and I realize, it could be lean, it could be Six Sigma. I think in government, probably most of what you need to do in improving processes probably reside within the tools that you get through lean. But at the end of the day, it's providing, and I want to get to kind of the people side of it because it was really tremendous to see what I saw as we stood up California's Lean Academy. Is that we did not equip our managers and our team members with tools to really understand the importance of processes, and how to measure processes. One of my mantras, actually I have two mantras as I go out and talk to people around the state, is when we lead people but we manage systems. And as a manager, you need to know how work is flowing through your organization. It's amazing how many managers just did not know that. I think they thought they were managing people. It's like, no, you lead people and you put people into good systems, and you need to know your system. And my mantra that kind of led to lean is, if you can't flow it, you don't know it, and you certainly better not automate it, because that's just a train wreck waiting to happen. And so, that caught on, but it really, really resonated with people. And then the other thing that I learned as we were launching our different Lean Academy training programs is the people that are the closest to the work often really know how to make it better. They just haven't been given the tools and the environment in which to really talk about it. And the other thing I found, and Chris, you're seeing it yourself, is nobody's looking at the end-to-end process. Somebody knows a piece of the process, and then they hand it off to somebody else who knows a piece of the process. And the beauty of lean is you can really decide what is that end-to-end you want to look at, and what an awakening happens with staff who suddenly understand what they just handed off to Jill, and Jill just handed it off to Mark, and oh my gosh, what a train wreck. This could be done so much better. And then they get excited and see the opportunities to make the process better. Now they care about cycle time. Now they care about error rates. Now they care about, the numbers from a customer perspective, that really affect how do we get this out in a timely fashion to our customers the first time, the right time, right? And so I just saw, firsthand the energy, the really positive energy being created by staff that were suddenly looking at there are ways to improve these government processes, and there were great tools to do it without pointing fingers at anybody.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Kathleen, another question from the listeners, and I'm directing this one to you because I know this one's really particularly important to your way of thinking. And the question kind of goes along the lines is EPM is all about data. However, how important is EQ in the context of enterprise performance management?
Well, we just kind of had a little chat about that, Scott. I think, when I think about, again, when you are about inspiring and developing your people as a leader, I mean, that's really your charge. Then that charge is to really have a level of EQ, emotional intelligence, and understanding how that manifests itself in the organization. But it also is about organizational readiness. Organizational readiness is really about your people, and you've got to understand, where are they at, meet them where they're at, and then get them to feel comfortable and excited about where you're going. And that's, to me, that gets to the importance of leadership, kind of creating that blue sky vision of where you're going and really being clear about that vision, explaining the why behind why we want to go where we're going. And then really understanding the current state of readiness, and be able to speak to people in a way that's going to resonate. I mean, the term is pretty old, but with them, right? I mean, what's the with them for them to care about? And that requires some EQ and EI to understand how to communicate maybe that message to different audiences. It may not be the same message to everybody, but you better know it as a leader so you can communicate it.
And Chris, I know that you've been having lots of difficult conversations in the Oregon Health Authority over the last year in 8 months or however long it's been. It's like a time work, this pandemic. And it's helped really bring out and illustrate some of the health disparities that you were talking about earlier. This also ties into that emotional intelligence and having those conversations. Can you share a little bit about that experience at OHA and the travels that your leadership team has had to go through?
Yes, thank you, Scott. That's an understatement, right? All of that together. I will tell a couple of things hit me right off the bat when I was thinking about all of this and the pandemic and how we have used the system as a way not only to see where we're at, but to recognize how much farther we have to go. And what's really interesting is before the pandemic happened, one of our measurements, I tell this story because I think it'll help relate to all of this. One of the measurements was how quickly were we doing translations in emergency events. And our hours, so they were calculated it by hours, right? So say Salem's water had a crisis, which it did in 2019, and the number of hours to get beyond English to actually share same information and what people should do in that crisis, it was days, it was 24, it was 36 hours later where people who read and spoke Spanish or read and spoke Vietnamese or whatever the language may be actually got the same information. Well, it just can't be, right? That can't be the way it goes. And the same thing happened. So that was a piece of health, right? Overall, that's a public health component, but it also directly relates to personal health. And COVID, of course, is a public health crisis, but I'm sure anyone on this call has been touched by COVID in some way, whether you've personally had it, someone who's had it, you may even know somebody who has died as a result of COVID. And what we have seen, because we were starting to be in tune with some of these disparities, when we did, and if you look on Oregon's website and you look at all the information we provide, we quickly saw how much the pandemic was impacting people of color and tribal communities, disproportionate to our population. And as a result, in looking at that data day in and day out, as we were looking at case counts and everything else, it resulted in a number of actions around how are we going to tackle the work with those communities of color and the tribal communities in mind and out in front, because at one point in our crisis, it was over 40% of the people in our case count were Hispanic. We don't have that many. Proportionately, it's like 18% in our population. So we were way out of whack. And what are we going to do as a result? Well, it's looking at that data and information, but then it's the humanity of it. It's the human component of understanding. We were having a hard time meeting communities where they were at and ensuring that we were speaking to them in a language that they understand and was culturally responsive. Some of these communities, government is not who they want to see. And, in many cases, and it could be true in the communities you were at, you called in the National Guard well, that's even worse in some cases for some communities to bring in people with uniforms, right? And yet they were trying to support and help the effort. And we had to look at that and understand the emotional impact of not only COVID as a disease, but then how were we going to respond in the crisis with contact tracing, with vaccines, with information to get out to people, and right now what we found is it's our field and community contact folks who are having the greatest influence in getting the various communities of color and tribal communities up and have their numbers reflect a better representation overall in our population of who's vaccinated, who's getting the care and information that they need if they are to get COVID. So it became the information and data was disturbing, and emotionally then it was upon us to do the work to figure out how are we going to change up the way we do our processes to actually meet people's needs. And we're talking about basic needs, because when you quarantine people or ask people to be quarantined, you're setting their whole life upside down. And, you know, like everyone else in every other state, we didn't know. It was brand new. Nobody knew how to fight it. Nobody knew what to do, what was the best. We were all making the best decisions we could based on the science. And yet it was impacting people. And that is where it really, we felt it, I guess, is the way you could say that.
Wow. So this next question very much ties into that, because I think you've touched on this a little bit, but the question is, how has enterprise performance management system changed the way you converse with your stakeholders? And now you're talking about very much, you know, the citizens there, but also the legislature. Can you share a little bit how that conversation with the legislature by using the enterprise performance system has changed the conversation?
I can touch on it really quickly. So we have, like I said, we set a strategic goal of eliminating health inequities by 2030. And COVID was really the opportunity to reflect on health inequities and health disparities from the data and information and a way to fight in this crisis. And the ongoing conversations and work that happened during COVID, it was an opportunity, right? Like this was like one of the best outcomes that could have come from the pandemic, is that legislators really started to understand health inequities and health disparities. And as a result, to be quite frank, Oregon's on a biennial system. Odd number of years are when they do the biennial budget. So at the end of June was legislature went home and the new biennium started July 1st of this year. And we have money we never anticipated getting, but here's the way that we talk about it from an enterprise performance system. And we're still figuring it out, so I'm not saying that it's perfect, but one of the many packages we put forward in Oregon was to bridge the gap for those people who are covered by health insurance. Currently, about 94% of people in Oregon are covered by health insurance, and we wanted to even close that gap a little bit more. So we went in with a policy option package to the legislature to ask for $10 million to expand the scope of who was covered, and it was going to take some work on the ground to do that. Well, what the legislature came back with is a policy option package that was at $100 million, so tenfold increase. And what they directed us to do was to go out to the communities, to our partners, and have them tell us who we should spend the $100 million on to bring them into the fold of those that were covered. So we have really used the conversation around it to really get at our strategic goal and some of our outcomes. And when we do work like that, we expect to see over time our outcome measures shift as more and more people are getting insured and therefore getting the healthcare and the access to healthcare that they actually need in order to address their health inequities. And so that's kind of big picture, and we see it on the ground. And one of our streams of work that we put in our fundamentals map as a core process was partner and stakeholder engagement. And so it's core to the work that we do. It is core to our mission overall. And then we've just incorporated all the way through our performance system in thinking about how do we, and part of our work actually, as I've talked about refreshing and updating, is how do we do a better job of bringing community into our work and reflecting that overall in our performance system. Not just from a measurement standpoint, but actually bringing them into the conversation about what would success look like to you if we achieved these outcomes. And they should be telling us what outcomes they want, right? Here's the outcome we want. So what is it going to take for you to redirect your work and your resources to make that happen?
Any other thoughts you want to add to that, Kathleen? That's very powerful, Chris. Thank you for sharing, because that's the real impact of having the information to really make policy decisions and drive the conversation to really impact outcomes for citizens. I mean, that's what we're here for, right? Yeah. Kathleen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think, Chris, thank you for sharing that. Impressive, and you're right. I think across the country, we've seen those disparity issues, and having the data to then figure out how to problem solve, right? I mean, that's really what you were able to do, and do that jointly with the legislature. I think the one piece I would add, and a slightly different aspect from where Chris was, is as we all are thinking about what does the future of work look like in state government, because there's obviously, with the pandemic, we've all been entertaining kind of a remote work, an office-centered worker. What does telework look like? But I will tell you that conversation becomes a lot easier when you have the ability to measure results. And the reality is, if our employees want to go down this path and they want to be office centered or remote centered or a teleworker, we still have to create a system that actually is capturing the work we're doing to measure the results that we're getting, right? And so I think one of the things that we've done in some of our workforce, or kind of a telework workforce work groups, and we've done some statewide work groups, is really talk about the importance of moving that direction and create systems to start capturing results. And I know, unfortunately, what I've seen in government is people get a little bit nervous when you start using that word performance management. But the reality is, in being good stewards to the people of California, we need to care about how we're managing our performance, but we need to do it at that unit level, at that management level. Because again, it goes back to, as a leader, did you put your people in a good process where they can be successful in getting the outcomes that you're looking for? So go back to your system and really understand, you as a leader, have you created a process and a system that ensures your staff is delivering value-added work? It's a value-added work stream that you've created. But and then how are you capturing that data? I mean, to Chris's point, I think you were able to make informed decisions on how you actually deployed your resources, because you had that really good data to really kind of drill down into those things. And as a leader, that's what you want. You want to be able to, when an emergency you're faced with, you have to make some immediate decision, but what data do I have so I make the best decision possible with the data that I have, and then be able to course correct as you need as your data improves, which is, Chris, it sounds like you were able to do that in just amazing ways to better serve the Oregonians. So I think I would just add that, and I think it's true for every state out there, because the pandemic has taught us, one, we potentially can telework, but by the way, how are you going to tell the people of your state the results that you're getting while you're also creating this environment of office center and remote centered workers?
Well, and to that end, both of you have adopted a software tool to help with implementing your performance management systems and to track measures. And I remember, Chris, when we first had that conversation, you said, "I'm not doing this in spreadsheets anymore." But can you talk about that might have been your reason for going forward, but talk a little bit more about how that impacts the organization, as having a tool that really helps enable the implementation of the performance management system and that transparency for everyone to see the metrics. And I don't, Chris, you can start, and then I'll have Kathleen follow up, because she's done the same thing.
So yeah, one of the powers of having a performance system is the ability to share it, right? And the ability for people to visually see information in a format that isn't a bunch of words on a page, but actually tells a story, or at least presents a picture and some information so that people can see what's happening, right? And so that was the an Excel spreadsheet, right? It can hold all the numbers, but the opportunity to turn that into something visual that works, everybody's using the same system, right? There's a consistency component. That's why we bought into the results software, because one, I just had to get away from spreadsheets, and it was becoming a crazy conversation, especially with all the outcome measures we created, et cetera, et cetera. But it was also an opportunity for us to tie some measures together, from units to programs to divisions, all the way up to agency-wide. And it was an opportunity very much to what Kathleen was saying, you have to look at performance at the unit level, and the divisions. I think of one division in particular in our organization has done that, just that, and it actually created so much excitement because the teams got behind what they were measuring because they were proud of the work that they were doing. And so then to share that visually and on a regular basis is something both that they work towards, they strive towards, and it's the opportunity to talk about what they do. And, you know, in the end, one of the things that's easiest for us to do is to talk about ourselves and the work that we do. And it's a way to show the pride, not just to say, this is what I'm doing, I'm really proud of the work, but here is what's happening as a result of the work I do with the team I work with, right? And so using the results system allows that storytelling to happen in a way. The consistency allows for people to see something once they get used to it and understand, you know, even as it moves from program to program, and this program's doing something very different from this program, but when you orient to a similar look and feel, then it's the ability to pick up, catch up, and follow kind of what's happening. And there's magic that happens as a result of that, I think.
Same question for you, Kathleen. I mean, you made that decision very recently. So, you know, what was the thinking that you had, and what was it that you hoped to achieve by using the software?
Yeah, I want to echo the magic that Chris was talking about. So a couple just thoughts to share with the audience. You know, when I was looking at kind of all the different units that I had at DMV, some are able to see themselves in the mission easier than others. And I think where people, you know, when you think about who comes to work for government, you know, there are a lot of reasons why people decide to become a government employee, but I think at the heart of who government employees are, they are about public service. They want to know that whatever they're doing is going for the greater good, for the mission that they've chosen to be part of at their department. But what I found is we were not very good at aligning what we were achieving with the individuals contributing to those outcomes. And I think to Chris's point is when you have kind of a uniform way that you're looking at things and you can show the alignment of how everybody is contributing to ultimately those outcomes, whether you're in the budget shop, the accounting shop, whether you're, you know, in vehicle registration or licensing, you know, some are much easier than others to show the alignment. Or let's talk about learning and development organization. How does that contribute? You can start now showing how those results that they're all getting at the unit level contribute to ultimately the strategic goals and outcomes you've set for your organization. And that is so powerful for, I think, at the individual level, as Chris was talking about, to see themselves as part of this greater good that they're contributing to. And wow, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, feel really good about what they did. And I just see that as culturally transformational for the organization in creating that enthusiasm and that magic that Chris was talking about.
Well, and we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I think you both might have just answered this next question is, you know, what are you most excited about so far on your enterprise performance management journey? And I'm hearing that being able to connect employees to the mission is quite exciting, but I don't want to put words into your two mouths. You know, Chris, what still excites you about this journey, and what are you most excited for going into the future?
Thank you, Scott. I think for us, and I've touched on it, is, you know, 3 years in with this organization, what we're getting is a lot of desire to update and refresh the map, right? And to do that and center a little bit more around our strategic goal. We didn't have the strategic goal identified when we did our initial map. We really did the map, as Scott and others on the Mass Ingenuity team know, to bring in business rigor inside of our organization, because it was crisis management, and we needed to get to what's the process and what are we looking for as the outcome kind of thing. But now we really, it's this opportunity to turn it much more towards the strategic and seeing people like, I want to show my work. Like, people are super engaged. We had the best QPR ever at our last one, And it was the ability to take an outcome measure that we had and talk about how 3 different divisions had taken that outcome measure and had changed the way they were doing processes to try to better the results as a outcome of that. And it was the best conversation to recognize that the organization is aligning about the work, and now they're pushing to say, let's check these other things to make sure we're aligned around the right thing that's going to get us to our strategic goal. And let's, maybe let some stuff go and bring some other stuff forward as a result. And that's the kind of rich conversation that anybody's looking for inside of their organization, is the ability to showcase the great work they're doing and also impact, as Kathleen said, we're here for the public service. So how do we best impact those that live and work in Oregon in our best way possible? So that's what I would say.
Yeah.
I love the passion, by the way. I really do. So, Kathleen?
Yeah, I agree with everything Chris said. And I think what I would add to the conversation is, government over, I think, the course of several years has probably not had the reputation we would like. But I will tell you, if you want to change that dialogue, this is a great step in making government better. And that's really what we're all committed to do, to serve the people that we serve in our various government organizations and to do it better than we did yesterday. But you have to have the information to know what better looks like. You got to get the feedback, from your customers. And I love the transparency piece that Chris talked about, when we're able to share the results we're getting. And I think equally so, what she was talking about, the importance of the legislature. The legislature wants to know they're making a return on investment. So if they're investing in your department, how are you showing that's the best use of the people's money to improve and make government better? Well, having a system like this in place to be able to go ahead and share that information and be able to show the outputs and outcomes that you're getting, that is so powerful in talking about the return on investment to continue to improve the services you're delivering to the people of your government community.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we are approaching the top of the hour. I want to thank the two of you for devoting your time and energy today to this conversation. I'm sure your colleagues around the country that were able to listen in today really enjoyed that and learned a lot. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do that. As you know, I'm still very passionate about this work and government service, and so this type of conversation always energizes me. So thank you again, and thank you all for attending. We appreciate having you here today.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everyone.